Today I'm going to show you how to magnetize a Ghost Ark into a Doomsday Ark the easy way, including the warriors inside the Ghost Ark, and it's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, today we are going to magnetize the Ghost Ark into a Doomsday Ark. I previously made a magnetizing video on how to fully magnetize this miniature, but today I'm going to show you an easier way to do it. However, the first job is the boring job, and that is to cut all of the pieces off of the sprue and clean up all of the mould lines. Just use a knife to scrape off all of the mould lines. This does take quite a long time. It took me 5 hours to remove all of the mould lines from my miniature, but it's worth it because when you paint the miniature you won't see those mould lines and it will just look so much better. Once you've completed this job, you are ready to start gluing, the fun bit. So we're going to glue the back section together. I have left the driver out, that includes the seat, and the driver itself I've not glued together at all because it's going to be easier to paint him and then build him after I've painted him. I've also left off the sections which go over that segment because again it's going to be really difficult to get the paintbrush in. I glued the spines together, the warriors, the big gun and the Gauss flayers, and we're ready to magnetize. However, there's a few things I just want to say here before we start magnetizing. First of all, it's the spines. I just want to point out to you that when you actually glue these together, they glue in a particular way. So there's like one way is flush and the other way it just doesn't sit quite right. So be careful when you eventually start gluing these. We're not going to glue them yet, and the reason for that is I'm actually going to magnetize my Gauss flayers on this miniature. Now you don't have to magnetize these flayers for this particular build, but I personally find it's really useful. It's easier to store the miniature with those Gauss flayers being able to come off. I just put them in a little bag next to the miniature. It makes storage a lot easier. It's also easier to play the miniature on the table because the guns sort of move around, so if you're positioning it in an awkward position, at least the guns can move and it just helps you to deploy it. But also, if Games Workshop ever bring back the rule where you have a weapon destroyed on a miniature, where you can take the guns off when they get destroyed. Now in my previous video where I fully magnetized this miniature, I had it so that I could rotate the spines in the up or down position depending on the miniature I was building. This is also why I magnetized the flayers on that original build, so that I could rotate the little gun holder in between the spines and then I could have the guns the correct way up. But in this video we are going to build it as a Ghost Ark, and then we're going to have the gun and the warriors interchangeable. You could just glue these guns into position, but like I said, I wanted to magnetize mine, and actually I improved the magnetization of these guns to my first video that I made. So rather than using some really small flat magnets, I'm now using some 2x1mm magnets. They're N52 strength, they're nice and strong, and I'm going to embed these magnets into the gun and the gun holder. When I made my previous video over 10 years ago, I wasn't as skilled or confident about doing this, and if you want an easier way then stick to my old video, but I have to say this way the magnets are both stronger and neater. So all we have to do is drill a 2mm hole out into the gun holder. This is really simple because there's a big gap there, nearly 2mm anyway, so we just have to drill a little bit out. Now bearing in mind that the drill is beveled, it's got like a point to it, so you always have to drill slightly deeper than the 2mm to actually make that magnet sit flush. And then for the gun itself, all we have to do is remove the little tab which would usually sit into the gun holder. Just take that off with a knife, and then all we have to do is drill a 2mm hole into the gun. Now to make life a little bit easier finding the central piece of this gun, I actually used a knife first, so I just twisted the knife and made a small hole, and that made it easier to locate the drill. Once that was done, I was ready to glue the magnets into place. I glued mine in the same polarity as my original miniature, but obviously the key thing here is to make sure that you glue them so they stick to each other. Now I used a very tiny piece of green stuff, that's an epoxy, which you can buy very cheaply on eBay. You just mix it together and then it goes hard. I used a tiny piece of this in the gun and into the gun holder before I glued the magnet in with super glue. You don't have to do that, I just find it's a bit easier. You'll also notice that I'm gluing the magnet in with my little file. That file is obviously metal, but it's got like a sponge handle, and I find it's perfect for holding the magnet but not really strongly. So once I glue it into place, I can take the file away and the magnet just stays in the hole. If you use a stack of magnets, sometimes that stack of magnets, you can just pull the magnet out of position after you've glued it. Right, so that's that all glued together and they're sticking very nicely. Now I've got the spines here just pushed together, obviously making sure they're in the right position. Like I said, if they're round the wrong way, they won't fit very well. And eventually we're going to glue these spines onto the back section. I'm going to not actually glue my gun holders into position like on my original tutorial. I like the idea of being able to rotate them, maybe just move the guns a little bit if I need to, but of course you could just glue these pieces into place. Now because I'm going to have moving parts, I'm going to take this little front section of the spine and I'm going to glue this into place and let it fully dry before I glue the little gun holders into place. I don't want the glue to stop the gun joints from moving. So now we're going to have a look at the front of this miniature, because there's two pieces that go there, one for the Ghost Ark and then another one for the Doomsday Ark. Now if we glued the Ghost Ark one into position, it means that when we put the Doomsday cannon in place, the Doomsday cannon is going to be shooting at that front section. So we're definitely going to have to magnetize this piece just to make the model, well, make any sense. So first of all, we're going to put a magnet into the little Doomsday Ark cover. So what we do here is put a small piece of green stuff into it. You don't have to do this, but I find it makes it a lot easier. And then we're going to super glue a 5 by 1mm magnet into place. This is again an N52 magnet, quite a strong magnet. We're just going to super glue it into place and let it dry. We're now going to take the front of the Ghost Ark, the first spine, and we're going to put some green stuff in the hole. The idea is we're going to put a magnet onto this green stuff. Now we don't want the green stuff to move, so I use a tool and I just push it up into the plastic just to make sure that it's nice and set into position. Now this green stuff takes about 3 hours to dry, but before it dries we're going to magnetize it. I'm going to use a 5 by 2mm magnet, so this is a thicker magnet, and of course that makes it a stronger magnet. In my previous video I was using two 5 by 1mm magnets glued on top of each other because I didn't have any 5 by 2mm magnets, but now I do. So we're going to use this one. So some super glue on the magnet and then push it into place, of course making sure it's the opposite polarity to the Doomsday cap which we've previously done. Now the Doomsday cap magnet isn't actually going to reach the magnet in this section. We can't really do a great deal about that, but what I can tell you is it fits into place quite well anyway without the magnet. But what I can tell you is the magnet does help it stick. There is a little bit of sort of magnetism there to keep it into place. Now to make sure the magnet is deep enough in the spine, you just take the Ghost Ark front section and you push it into place, and that allows you to obviously get the right depth. So now what we have to do is put a magnet into the Ghost Ark section. I'm going to use a 5 by 1mm magnet because I don't want this to be too powerful, don't want it to be too hard to get out of position. Now the magnet doesn't actually fit into the hole as it stands. You just have to cut a little bit of plastic away just to widen the hole. Once you've done that, then all you have to do is fill the hole with some green stuff and then push the magnet into place until it's flush. So that's that all done and drying. We're now going to have a look at the back section of this miniature. Again, I haven't glued these spines together yet. I'm going to do that in a minute. But before we glue everything together and then glue it to the driver section, we're going to put a magnet in the top piece where the Doomsday cannon is going to go. It's going to be really difficult to put this magnet in if you glue all the spines together onto that piece beforehand. Again, I'm going to be using some green stuff, so I just take some green stuff and I make it into a little tube. I'm just going to push this into the hole. I don't want too much green stuff that the gun doesn't sort of fit into position, but my aim here is to make the magnet flush with the top section of that join. I'm going to use a 5x2mm N52 strength magnet, a nice strong thick magnet, and I'm going to super glue it into the green stuff and I'm going to make it nice and flush. Now you may find once everything is dry that green stuff just comes off of the plastic. It's quite common, actually I'll be surprised if it didn't. Once that happens, all you have to do is get some super glue and super glue the green stuff back into position onto the plastic. All we have to do now is put a magnet into the back of the Doomsday cannon. So all we do is we use a 5x1mm magnet, and we're going to use some green stuff to help hold it into position, and of course magnetize it with a reverse polarity. Now this Doomsday cannon is going to go into position upside down as such. You've got the little joining wires which would normally be in the up position when you put it at the bottom of the miniature, but because we're putting it at the top of the miniature, I'm going to rotate that so those wires are downwards. It will give it more support and it will just look better. Now, whilst all of that is drying, I'm going to put some magnets on my warriors. I'm going to use 5x1mm magnets once again. Now, you could use smaller magnets, maybe embed the magnets into the plastic, but these models are quite heavy, and I find if you don't use powerful enough magnets, they will sort of start rotating all over the place. And in my previous build, using these 5x1mm magnets, both in the Ghost Ark and also in the actual warriors, made for a really nice solid fit. So I cut the joining section off with my pliers, made sure it was nice and flat, then I just glued a magnet into position. Right, that is all dry and our gun is magnetizing very nicely. Now we are going to build the spines. So I'm just going to use my plastic glue. I'm going to put the little gun holders into position without gluing them, glue the pieces together, make sure I glue them the correct way, and when those 6 pieces are glued together, I'm then going to glue those to the back section where the driver sits. Right, that is all done. So now we've got the gun, which is magnetized into the top section for when we want a Doomsday Ark. We've also got the front section there for the Doomsday Ark, when I can actually get it into place. There you go. And then we've got, of course, the Gauss flares, which are magnetized. And then we can take that Doomsday cannon out, take off the front section, and then just put it into the gap where the gun normally goes, and then the Ghost Ark front goes on. And of course, now we can just magnetize the warriors. So this is pretty simple again. This is 5x1mm magnets. We're going to use a little bit of green stuff as well, just to help the whole thing stick and just make the process easier. And of course, we're going to make sure we're magnetizing them in the opposite direction to the warriors, so the warriors actually stick. So I'm literally going to put some green stuff where the warrior plastic would normally glue, and then I'm going to use some super glue the magnet into position. Make sure it's nice and straight, so when the warrior is magnetized, it's in an upright position. And we're nearly done. All we have to do now is glue the little pieces of plastic along the spine, and of course sort out the base, because the base is very fragile on this rather large miniature. However, I've got a perfect solution which makes this base fit into the miniature really well. Now I've got a video showing you how I did my bases and made them so strong on this miniature. You can see how to do it right there. And here's a video showing you how I fully magnetized this miniature, just in case you're interested.